You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to Soccer Today, Kevin. I was out this morning doing some stuff, and winter has arrived, at least here in Toronto. I don't know if you've had it hit yet.
Yeah, here too. Minus like 12 this morning.
Yeah, if you thought it was cold at MLS Cup on Saturday, if you were here from out of town, just be thankful that it's not this coming weekend, because it is nasty out there right now.
I think a minus 20 something is forecast for Toronto. For Montreal, it'll probably be coming too. We have nothing to be worried about here. We're going to get the minus 20s and 30s and maybe a few minus 40s like we've seen the last for a few years. But yeah, imagine if MLS Cup was minus 25. Yeah, that would have been like almost impossible to do.
Well, yeah, the game that was in Kansas City several years ago actually was colder than the game in Toronto. This is the nature of the beast when you're going to have a neutral site venue. And I think that, I don't know, the cold kind of adds to the elements a little bit. I mean, you want a certain level of it. But that said, here
Duane,
in Toronto in the lead up. So Kevin, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say it added to the romance of it when it was just as cold as it was on Sunday. More than that, you're talking about limbs falling off and toes and fingers missing. Then it stops being romantic.
Yeah, I saw, speaking of the MLS Cup on Saturday, I just saw this morning a side view of Steph Fry's save in the stoppage time off the Josie header.
That's kind of crazy.
From the south end, I'll tell you this, from the south end, it didn't look that impressive of a save. It did at live. Like when it happened live, we were like, oh, that was close, but not like as crazy close as it was. Like that was a half centimeter from TFC winning the MLS Cup.
It was an inch. If you go with the 3D dimensions you like the goal technology would show you, it's like maybe an inch or two off that line. It's kind of crazy, the wherewithal that he have mid-flight to reach back, and we're going to see that famous save for decades now. But if you have a minute, it's on MLSsoccer.com right now, how that save was described around the world. And you have the TSN call by Luke Wellman, RDS by Claudine Duville, and others in Spanish and German. And yes, it is quite spectacle. It's quite a spectacle.
Yeah, I'm just glad I wasn't in the north end, because I think that might have been enough to drive people over the edge at that particular point. But oh well, we move on. Speaking of moving on, there is a rumor out there. Now, this is reported in some Spanish, like Latin American press. So take it for what it is, but a rumor right now that the CCL format will be changing moving forward. So what I will say is the format that I'll explain in a minute, which is convoluted to when you quick look at it. But
you put it in writing in front of me, and I still don't get it. So I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, I with the caveat, I will explain it now with the caveat that this probably could be adjusted or whatever, but I do think that there is a change in the CCL format coming, and it's going to go back to something closer to what the CONCACAF Champions Cup was, the CCC, back before the CCL. And essentially, this format would do away with the group stages at all, that you would get rid of that, and you would have the Mexican and the American teams and the Canadian team coming in to the competition in the second part of it. So what it would be is it would actually increase the amount of teams participating in the tournament back up to 32. But 16 of those teams would participate in what I'm going to call a qualifying tournament for it. That's the better way to think about this. So you have 16 teams playing in the fall. So that would have been just taking place right now. Would be playing a two-legged knockout bracket. So they're going to be divided into 8 matchups, then 4, then 2, then 1, right? So that you get one champion coming out of these 16 teams. So from 16, one would advance to the final round of 16. that then would take place in the same format. Does that make a little more sense to you, Kevin?
Yeah, it feels kind of difficult for the team that has to win in the fall. Like, well, about the team that go in the second round? They just have to fall off. They're just not playing CCL or in the fall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it would be. That there would be no, like right now during the playoffs, during the playoff run, there would be no, or during the playoff run in, there won't be any more CCL play for the American and the MLS teams. The Canadian team, if it's still involved, would not be playing those games. In the past, they were. So, as I said, from the time that they announced this competition, Kevin, there has been pushback from mostly the USSF and from the Mexican Federation towards having to play these games. Or when I say the USSF, I'm really talking about MLS in this particular case, because the MLS teams don't want to play these games. The Mexican teams don't want to play these games. They don't want to go to Joe Public in October when they're in the middle of a playoff race that matters to them and have to play their players. So they have been pushing and pushing and pushing to try and find a format that is a little more favorable to them. So what will happen here is that instead of getting, it used to be a 4-team group, so you'd be guaranteed 6 games. You'd play if you made the group stage. Now it's 3 teams group, so you're going to be guaranteed 4 games. Now, basically, if you make the CCL, you may only play 2 games, and that's one home and a home series with whoever you're drawn against. Again, the teams in the spring would be 4 Liga MX, 4 MLS, 1 Canadian, 5 Central American, 1 Caribbean, and whoever won the qualifying tournament. So when you look at it that way, you would be looking at that fall tournament would be a lot of smaller teams that are from mostly Caribbean probably, and Belize and places like that would be like Police United would be in that fall tournament, and whoever advanced from it would get to play with the big boys, probably only for 2 games, but they'd get to play in the big boys. But the long and the short of it is it would be complete knockout, no group stages, and that's your bottom line.
Duane, why make it so complicated? It's so easy. Group stage, knockout stage. There's a champion at the end. It's not that difficult. You put groups of 4, top 2 moves on. There's a knockout stage, and there's a winner. Why are they always trying to find ways to overcomplicate it?
This is the thing that comes down to this, and you're right. This is not intuitive when you look at it. It took me a while. I organized tournaments and stuff sometimes, and even I was like, "What the hell is this?" Okay, I get it now, but it's basically one of the things that's confusing is this rumor isn't really telling you or explaining where these 16 teams in the fall are coming from. Well, they tell you where they're coming from, but not like how they qualify into it. Whereas we already sort of understand how the 4 Liga MX teams and the 4 MLS teams, the 1 Canadian team, and the 5 it's the teams that qualify from there right now. Like the Caribbean champion would go in. You'd have your champions of Honduras, El Salvador, like the big Costa Rica. Those teams would go in there, and you basically, I think, looking at this quickly, the Costa Rican runner-up would be the one club that would be sort of screwed by this format, because I suspect that Costa Rica would only get 1 spot directly into the main draw, and that they would have to earn their way in through the other draw, which would mean that Costa Rican team would likely be the favorite every year in that fall draw, because the Costa Rican league is, I think, clearly the 3rd best league in the continent.
Well, at least at the top heavy teams of that league.
Yeah, so they would probably advance pretty easily through it. Saprissa or whoever. What's the other team? I always say it wrong.
Alajuelense, the one.
Yeah, Alajuelense. Yeah, thank you, because you say it better than me.
Alajuelense, where Venegas came from, by the way.
Yes, so one of those 2 teams would probably be that fall. That's how I read this anyway. My quick take on it is this: is that I empathize a little bit with the complaints that that MLS and Liga MX have. MLS has legitimate complaints in the fact that their teams are being forced to jump into the knockout rounds when they're not even remotely prepared to in February. Montreal overcame that. Salt Lake City's overcame that. Toronto overcame that. Well, they played another MLS team though, but other teams have overcome that little problem they have. The Mexican teams I have less sympathy for, because you're either going to grow the region or you're not. But what it comes down to with them is they just view the tournament overall as a pain in their ass, in the sense that they're going to win it every year anyway, and they just rather get down to business quicker. So this is a scenario.
But one thing though about the Mexicans, it's a club more than the league that favors or not this tournament. I remember in the day where not top tier, but middle table, a more Mexican team were using the CCL to bigger their brand, the Monterrey, Santos Laguna, and eventually led to Club America, arguably the biggest club in Mexico City as well. They viewed that tournament as a potential of biggering their brand, and that's what they have done over the last 2-3 years. So I do feel some teams take this tournament very seriously in Mexico, more than in the past, but as a whole, I think you're right.
Yeah, Santos and Cruz Azul, I think of clubs like that did quite well in the CCL for several years in the early parts of it, certainly have utilized it well. Look, I think it's inevitable that there will be change. The one thing I come back to is, if you do, why don't they just limit it to champions, pardon me, and then have two 14 groups? Wouldn't that make more sense? And then a semifinal final. That would reduce the amount of games you play, and it would make the games you play more meaningful. So you're not going to have 4 MLS teams in it suddenly. Maybe you have 2, and the Canadian champion would probably still get in, but nonetheless, you'd have bigger clubs playing around each other more often in a group more intense. But they still don't want to play that, perhaps because everyone sort of prioritizes their own league over this competition, and that's always the problem. And I think one of the reasons is, what is the reward? The reward is happening right now, and who is talking about the Club World Cup right now? Who can?
Well, FIFA.com, other places too, but yeah, no, it's a gala tournament the way it is presented now.
Yeah, and if that competition was a little more prestigious, then the CCL in turn would be a little more prestigious. Speaking of the Club World Cup, there was an upset in it. We do have an Asian champion. The Kashima Antlers have advanced to the final to play Real Madrid. So that is at least something there. And I've always felt
Real Madrid beat Club America
2-0 this morning, and the Antlers won 3-0, that's a shocking result, actually. The Antlers
over who?
Atletico Nacional, but I think they were going through some stuff. So yeah. That's a result that no one would have really expected, but nonetheless, that does mean the Asian team will play Real Madrid, the Europe team, in the final. So that is only the second time in the history of that tournament that you will have a non-UEFA Euro or CONMEBOL UEFA Champions final.
Yes, there was a Casablanca in 2013 as well that one of our listeners mentioned on the social media yesterday.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So there's been some teams out there that have done it. I've always felt that the only way that this competition becomes relevant in any true way is if a region like Asia rises up and becomes truly competitive against European teams. So this final, to me, which I will likely watch this because it's an interesting thing to me, it is on Sunday at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So fire up your streams wherever you can find that one. I will watch that one because it does seem like that is an interesting test. And I once, because I think it's hilarious that they're called the Antlers. That's always been my J-League team. So go Antlers.
And by the way, if you're interested about the FIFA Club World Cup, you can follow Simon Fudge's work on FIFA.com about the FIFA Club World Cup right now.
And maybe we'll reach out to Simon and have him on to talk about this in a little more detail. He's offered his services, and we just haven't been able to get to him yet. So
yeah, exactly. It's just a timing issue because he's actually working right now, probably writing about the FIFA Club World Cup while we're talking about it.
Yeah, so we'll reach out to Simon and see what we can do for tomorrow, or at least maybe for next week, to wrap the tournament up in a general way. That is that. But I don't know. The CCL, to me, worked best when it had the 14 groups. I wish they'd go back to them. I do understand the instinct to go to a tournament. At least this is a little bit different than what the CCC was back in the day. If you don't remember the CCC, guys, it was an 8-team tournament that took place in the spring. So it had the same issues, or not in the spring, the winter. It had the same issues that MLS teams had in it right now. MLS won the championship twice, but they won the championship twice when they hosted it. So the Galaxy were the champions, but the Galaxy hosted the tournament. So it was a bit Mickey Mouse. They did need to go to more of a Champions League format, but there can only be one Champions League, right? And it just has struggled to match the excitement. And any of us who have I've stood in crowds of 3,000-4,000 watching Champions League games here in Toronto. I've also stood in crowds of 40,000 watching a Champions League crowd in Toronto, and 60,000 watching one in Montreal. So it goes hot and cold, the tournament. But
I've been in one in 80,000, Duane.
Exactly.
Azteca,
And,
and
ultimately,
still highlight of my
I
life.
guess that the one good thing about the format is if you get to that second phase of 16, you're going to have some pretty good matchups. And if you're in it as one of those teams, those ties can be marketable. You could market them all year because the draw would probably take place at Christmas. You'd know going in to your season that you were going to play that. So let's say the Impact were in the tournament and they drew Cruz Azul, let's say, and you could market that into your season ticket packaging, selling, and all that sort of stuff too. So that might be a benefit as well.
But Duane, just to go back, like the nights of the CSL is at the Stade Olympique or Estadio Azteca, those remain to this day one of the highlights of my life until my wedding day. Those will probably be the highlights of my life, those CCL games. So even though it depends which club you're facing, how you hype the game, you get out of it what you put. And for some clubs, those moments will be etched in history forever.
Yeah, I'm not going to compare my wedding day to any soccer game.
Well, I'm not married yet, but that will change.
Well, I'm not married either, so you can do your own judgment on why I'm not going to compare it there, right there. So there you go. Is what I'm saying. All right, let's take a quick break before Duane gets too personal and come back with some Canadian Player of the Year talk.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
It's like rain on your wedding day. No, what? Okay, we're back. The Canadian Player of the Year award will be announced in 45 minutes, Kevin.
Yes. By the end of the show, maybe.
Yeah, usually by this time I would have an embargoed press release already. It hasn't arrived yet. I suspect we'll get it in the next few minutes along with the call-in information. We're going to cut the show off a little early today so that maybe 10 to somewhere there, just a few minutes before 12, so that we can record that press conference for you and get it out on the network. So that'll happen whenever Kevin can get it up. But
probably this afternoon. Later this afternoon.
Yeah. Well, it depends. The sound quality for those things is always a little dodgy, but nonetheless, it's raw, and we put it up as raw, and some people like to listen to that stuff. So we'll get it up there for you. Now, we're not supposed to tell you who has won these awards after they give us an embargoed press release. So I'm not going to, but I am, based on reading between the lines, going to speculate that, well, I'll make a name up, Kevin, is what we'll do here. I'm going to just, pull a random name, and we'll talk in generalities about these players. So the random name I'm going to pull up on the men's side is Antonio Henry. So Antonio Henry.
That's a lame name. Come on. That's the best you could do. Best you could do. Come on. Yeah. I don't know. You could have done
Anthony Henry. How's that one?
To be really the true solitudes, like a Jocelyn Gagnon, that he's from like Franco, Ontario or something. I don't know.
There you go. Well, the initials might have been my key. What I was going with that, if you think about it. But yeah. Sure. Okay, we are speculating now because I do not have the embargoed release, but I assume Hutchinson's won this thing. And is that a worthy candidate? Is that, I know that
it is, but I have a feeling for next year. So maybe we can, we'll celebrate the player when we can. But I don't know if you watched Burnley and West Ham yesterday, but the way Scott Arfield played, he was one of the best players for Burnley. The way he got that free kick on that almost went in and was instrumental in another chance by Burnley. They didn't score. They lost 1-0 to West Ham. But for me to have Scott Arfield in the highlight package, instrumental in that game, maybe there'll be more competition in the years ahead in that competition.
That's true. The Arfield's an interesting debate too, because he's Scottish. I mean... Let's face it.
Yeah,
that happens to have some.
He's the Canadian.
He's Canadian international. I get that, and I'm not trying to judge that, but I am saying that might. Well, we have this talk all the time on the U.S. side, and American listeners will understand this from, Bruce Arena and Abby Wambach and people like that saying, asking questions about the loyalty of the the passport only Americans that play for that team, and they get very touchy about that because they'll say they're proud Americans. They're their fathers or their mothers, usually their fathers, served the U.S., and that's how they became Americans, because they were born into a military family. So, of course, they're proud and patriotic. So we recognize that, but it does, nonetheless, we can still recognize that and have a conversation about whether that hurts their chances to win the award. In the U.S., we'll leave that well enough alone. Right now in Canada, I would say that our field might struggle a little bit to get the votes of some of the voters out there, because they will view him as not being Canadian enough. And we can,
and Burnley's not playing in the Champions League.
Yeah, well, precisely. And that's, well, in terms of Atiba this year, I would go back to him. That's so speculating moving forward, because I don't think our field has much of a chance this year. I think an MLS player would be more likely to win. It would really comes down to with Atiba, that captaining a team in a Champions League group stage, and he will be in the Europa League as well. He's had success there for a while. He's kind of hidden in Turkey, but more and more as voters on the sort of mainstream side of the voting spectrum here have a greater understanding of the Canadian player pool now than they did 3, 4, 5 years ago. So they're able to sort of get past some of those issues that held guys like that back. I'll tell you right now, having watched this award and followed this award for several years, I don't think Atiba Hutchinson wins it if this is 5 years ago, because I think probably the winner would be Kyle Larin. It would be someone in MLS, maybe Bernier, someone in MLS. And they're worthy guys, but they're, it's because they'd be front and center. You'd be the guys you're seeing. D-Row won a lot of these where people questioned it, because D-Row is the best player in Major League Soccer, or at least the most dynamic player in MLS soccer, and that was why he was winning them. Well, you had guys like Paul Stalteri in the peak of their career doing amazing things, whereas Stalteri did end up winning one of these, but nonetheless, I think he probably should have won more. And that type of stuff was overlooked back in the day, whereas now I think there's a greater understanding of what someone like Atiba Hutchinson is doing out there, and how impressive that is, and so on and so forth.
It'll be interesting, too, if that ever comes to be one of the reasoning why maybe Atiba is going to potentially come back to the continent eventually. There's a rumblings last few weeks where maybe he's going to try to get out of Besiktas, either this transfer window or the upcoming one. I think his contract is ending soon as well, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe there's going to be time in the future where Atiba sees what MLS has been doing and either wants to contribute or maybe go back to England or something. So there's a lot of potential with Atiba in the next few years as well. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up, because he achieved what he wanted with Besiktas. Maybe not have gone to the group stage of the Champions League this year.
Yeah,
exactly. So we'll see what happens with Atiba, and we'll see if he is indeed the 2016 Player of the Year of the Canadian Soccer Association.
Yeah, Besiktas is a team too that, if everything came together, they could go deep in the Europa League. But they're also a team that like any team in Turkey, there's instability there. There's no guarantee, even at those big clubs, that the paycheck's coming through in the same way that you'd expect it somewhere else. So when I saw that result at the end of the group stage, and I'm just going to say this carefully, where they got their ass handed to them, despite consistently playing better than the club that they lost to throughout that, Dynamo Kiev, I believe, throughout that stage, bells go off in my head that maybe there's players on his team. And I'm not, Hutchinson to me is not a guy at all that I'm casting a net over here, but you want to get out of that environment sometimes, is where I'm coming from here. That maybe there's too much going on around him. Maybe he's seen stuff in Turkey that tells him that his time over there is done. He loves those fans, and those fans love him. But wouldn't going to West Ham for a couple of years, or even coming to, with the money that's coming into MLS, maybe coming to Minnesota United as their DP, wouldn't that be just as nice too in many ways?
Just a player with a lot of time on him as well, maybe.
Yeah.
If you find ways to bring a Bernardello, which used to be a DP in Major League Soccer, back with Montreal, and with Tam able to make him fit in your salary cap, maybe Atiba can be that type of role too. $500,000 and more with Tam could be 300,000 and 200,000. Then the hit is not that bad. So no, there is possibly ways for Atiba to come in Major League Soccer next season or the one after.
Yeah, and look, the other part about Atiba coming back to North America, obviously, he's a proud athlete and he's never going to play in a World Cup. We now know that. So what would be his greatest accomplishment as an athlete that he could match then? I think playing in the Premier League would be something that he would put up there. I think playing in the knockout round against Real Madrid or Barcelona or something like that in the Champions League would be something he might put there as well. But he has played those teams now. So maybe he's ready to come back and get the recognition back here that he deserves. And I think that would be something that we would all appreciate. And he is starting to get that recognition. Like a guy like Matt Dole on MLSsoccer.com, Extra Time Radio, they called him, one of the best CONCACAF players that will never make a World Cup after the last World Cup cycle ended for Canada. So little comments like that are out there amongst informed people outside of Canada. But if he came back to Major League Soccer and did what he did what he's doing right now in Turkey, I think that he would get that kind of universal understanding as one of the great North American players of the last decade. And that's something that I think we'd all like to see. And it would benefit Canadian soccer as well to have another guy that is seen as a star in Major League Soccer, not just a guy that's sort of hanging around him on Major League Soccer.
Here's an example how Patrice Bernier has been since he came back to Major League Soccer in 2012. He has been, like you mentioned, more than just a player, was a star, was praised by De Henry and the big names of this game, saying this guy was one of the best midfielder in MLS right now. That happened on multiple occasions since his return to the Montreal Impact in 2012. And yes, he was known, he was famous, he was a good soccer player in his career, playing in the Champions League, in great leagues in Europe for great teams at different countries. But the recognition that he has since he's been joining the Montreal Impact in the likes of the North American soccer world has been amplified by multiple times because of his play in Major League Soccer. And he's had the recognition of his entire career almost with those 5 seasons now with the Montreal Impact.
Yeah, you look at a guy like D-Row too, who played his whole career in MLS and always had that attention. And then the Toronto coming in near the end of his career and him being able to end his career in Toronto after an unsuccessful stint before that. Well, it was successful in terms of scoring goals, but we all know how it ended. At any rate, the point I'm making is that D-Row now has a job with TFC and he's a community ambassador, and he is the guy that you see on the morning shows on CTV promoting this team and things like that. Those kind of jobs and opportunities for true stars did not exist in Canada a decade ago. They do now. So if a team came back, and he doesn't have to play in Canada, he could play for any MLS team, I think. He has an opportunity then, I believe, to start to set up his post-career. And that's an important thing for any athlete to start to do when they hit their 30s, is to figure out where they're going to go. And if he wants to stay in the game, I think coming back to MLS would make a lot of sense for him, because I think he'll have more opportunity to stay in the game over here. We should talk about the women briefly before we get out of this segment.
We speculated that we actually were behind another Christine St. Clair win this year.
Yeah, I am, and I'm more and more at peace with that. And again, this is coming from someone who has not voted for Christine St. Clair for each of the last 3 seasons. I did vote for her in 2012. You would have had to been, a rock to not understand that she was the player of the year in 2012.
Yeah, instrumental in the bronze medal win in 2012, obviously, and of course.
But I felt that, for many reasons, she was not the best player in Canada for the years that follow. I voted for Diana Matheson in 2013. I voted for Sophie Schmidt in 2014, and I voted for Katisha Buchanan in 2015. So this is interesting for me to go back to Sinclair after 4 years off, and I did not anticipate that I would. But when I look at the leadership she provided in London, I look at the just what she did, how she changed her position, how she integrated players like Becky into the system, so that there was not just her scoring goals, but that she was scoring goals again, big international goals. And during an Olympic year or a World Cup year, I think the play at the Olympics or the World Cup is going to take at least 80% of your thinking when you're casting that ballot. When I voted for Schmidt and when I voted for Matheson, a lot of the reason I did was because of their play on the club side. I think it's fair on the women's game that when you're in a major tournament year, that you need to look at that major tournament in isolation almost to make this vote. And that's precisely why Buchanan ended up winning last year to break Sinclair's vice grip on the trophy, because of her play, her defender of the tournament play at the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2015. So we'll see. Still no email yet, so I can't confirm or deny this. I couldn't anyway, because we do have live listeners. But by the time you listen to this, you'll probably know, and hopefully we'll have that live sound, barring any issues with my phone recording it. And we'll probably won't talk a lot about this tomorrow, but we'll at least get you the winners out there if you're not tuned in to find them yourself. Kevin, We're a minute early on the break, but let's take it now. We'll come back with some bits and brights.
The bits and bites on Soccer Today.
All right, and we're back. Lot of stuff on the lineup here for the bits and bites today, Kevin. So we'll just start going through it and see where they go, and we'll take this for as long as we can. The first thing that I have on here is that MLS formally announces its expansion format today. Are they ever going to stop expanding, Kevin?
Maybe one day. I don't know when that day will be, but for sure one day they'll two conferences of 20 team. Maybe that's the ultimate dream.
I keep going back to that. It sounds that would be the largest North American sports league. Like, what is that? It begs the question: what is the cap of in a league?
Not just that, Duane, because you could do a balanced schedule on each side, and you have a true super MLS Cup where two conferences that never play each other playing one game off. It could actually be quite something.
Yeah, you're basically creating two leagues and then having a championship among them at that point. And if you are willing to go that far in your head, and there are enough markets out there willing to pay and willing to play, then this is also, when you think, a lot of people turn their nose down at this, the idea of having like a crazy large league, 40 teams, hell, 48 teams, because you could go to 24 if you wanted as well. They look down at that, but then you think about it, one of the complaints of the pro rel crowd is that there are markets that are going to be shut out if there is a closed expansion process, and that is true. But if you're getting up to 40, if you're getting up to 48 or something like that, then are we really shutting anyone out at that point?
No, because everybody's in. Like when Paducah, Kentucky has its own team in Major League Soccer, everybody got in,
Yeah, so I think it's really just it's a financial model at that point. And
sorry for any listeners in Paducah, Kentucky. You never know.
The Paducah Petunias, FC. You gotta get the FC in the end of it. Yeah, no, it's certainly there's questions about watering the talent pool down and so on and so forth, but nonetheless, it is a global market is the argument they always make on that, and we do always seem, in fairness, there does always seem to be those expansion teams launching at a level that is higher than you anticipate. And
you know what it is too? For example, a small town that is on the fringe, or even a big town like St. Louis, they look at themselves, the city, the population, and they look at the Premier League, the size of some teams over there, like Bournemouth, be like, you know what? We're 10 Bournemouth. We should have a team in the biggest league. And there's that aspect to it too. Well,
and then you get the big bigs, the metro cities, that start to say, well, if London can have 15 teams, I can have 3.
Exactly.
And that's, the Cosmos argument, right? And Don Garber did actually say, it's not on the lineup, but we'll put this in as our next topic. Don Garber did actually shut at the idea of a third Metro New York team. I don't necessarily like the hockey model. I don't know, does it work though? Because the Rangers are New York's hockey team.
Yes. The Devils are New Jersey's hockey team.
And the Islanders are no one's hockey team.
The Islanders are, I guess, Brooklyn / Long Island, and it's kind of not odd, I will say.
Yeah, I mean, the point being, both the Devils and the Islanders have hardcore fans. But they're talking about very specific hardcore fans, whereas the Rangers are the overall team which is, I think, if you add another team in New York, that's exactly what would happen. And it's a battle over the next few years to see whether it's going to be NYCFC or whether it's going to be the Red Bull. I do happen to think that for a lot of reasons that NYCFC is going to win that battle, because I think the connection to Manchester is going to be viewed less pejoratively by a casual fan than the connection to a corporate branding and the fact that they play in New Jersey. And that is the biggest one of all, that second one. So if you're going to put a third MLS team in the Metro New York market, I think you'd have to put them in Long Island. You would have to call them Long Island or Westchester or something like that was specific to a region and make them that area of the region's team. Because if you just called them New York something, I think they'd get lost. Just as the Cosmos, that's they didn't, as loud as their fans were and lovely in some cases. Lewis is a good guy. There weren't enough of them to sustain that project, and that bore itself out. And it's not all because they were playing in NASL.
No, yeah, true. It's going to be very interesting there to if there is 48 teams. I still feel 40 would be like perfect, because then you play what it would be a 38 season. Yeah, 38 game season. Then
same as Premier League.
Yeah, same as Premier League. But then you have the playoffs, and you could have maybe the playoffs of just the top 4 of each side, so semifinal, conference final, and then you have the ultimate MLS Cup.
TFC played 40 games this year. Well, 44 games this year competitively, and that was a lot, but it didn't seem too much. I think you're getting kind of at the upper end when you get into the 40s, so you'd have to figure a playoff format that would work. The other thing about 40, the only caveat I have to my 220 and 20 idea that I put out there is, for God's sakes, do not have 16 teams in each of those 20 conferences making the playoffs. That would be stupid.
Exactly. That's what you need.
That'd be their instinct, though. It would.
You need 4. That's what I think. 4 out of 20 makes it.
You could even do crossover at that point. You could have the top 4 in the East, the top 4 in the West, and then they would, rather than play, because you would already have an Eastern and Western champions, because they'd be playing a balanced schedule.
So you're saying you actually have a normal table, never mind the 2 conferences. You have a normal table. You only play each side, and the top 8 make the playoffs out of the 40.
That's what I would say. Yes, you have MLS West, MLS East. You declare MLS West champion at the end of the regular season, MLS East champion at the end of the regular season, based on the table. So they get their supporters shields. So you make a second supporters shield. Boom, they are the champions of the season. And then you have a playoff for MLS Cup, which is for the overall championship. We know in North American mentality that would be the one everyone would focus on, but you would still be able to have the purists see their 20-team league with the table and blah, blah, blah. That would still be there. There still would be a hardcore Reddit and big soccer kind of crowd that would think of those people as the true champions. The rest of us would ignore them, and that would be fine. And then you would have, so MLS East 1 would play MLS West 4, MLS East 2 would play MLS West 3, and so on and so forth. And then you would just have a bracket breakdown from there and declare an MLS Cup champion. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and that'd be a good sort of way to do it, because there are so many markets out there that are worthy, and so many markets out there that are desirable. I think right now in this next round of expansion, where we're at, we're going to 20. We're at 22 next year, right? And then
yes, we're at 20 now. So yeah, we'll be at 22 with Atlanta and Minnesota.
And 23 coming in with the 24th team.
Probably 24th team by 2019, I would say, because 2018 we have LA. Who knows? Maybe there's going to be a second one coming in with LA to keep an even number. We might know more about that side of it today with the Don Garber conference call.
Yeah, 24. Yeah, the 24th team will either be Sacramento or Miami. If they could get anything together in Miami, they would rather go there. Yeah, I know.
Well,
it's got to. Can you imagine being? We talked about this many times, but it has to be so frustrating to be a Sacramento fan, because they are ready. They have a stadium. They have everything, and they just keep ignoring them because they just. It's like, to use a dating analogy, it's like the nice girl next door who's nothing wrong with her, loyal as hell to you, but you keep chasing the supermodel down the street, even though the supermodel down the street has 17,000 things that 17,000 other people chasing them, and barely knows who you are.
And she's always on her phone. She's never paying attention. She's always looking for the next guy. She's always swiping right on Tinder. That type of person.
Yeah, and you probably, we all know you'd be better off with Mary next door rather than Sofiane.
Or Josephine. Josephine down the road.
Yeah, down the line. I mean, come on. But good luck, Sacramento.
So Miami is Josephine, and Sacramento, poor Mary.
Poor Mary. Speaking of Florida, Kyle Lauren has got his green card. I just wanted to mention that. That's good for him, because it'll open up his opportunities. Within Major League Soccer, if he chooses to go to Orlando's a bit of a cluster right now, I think. So we'll see. I'm not too convinced with the direction that Orlando is going. I know that we have a few Orlando listeners out there, so I don't say that to be mean. I say that as someone who has watched TFC for 10 years and knows what both a good team and a bad team looks like now. So good luck. I think that Lauren, as I've talked to many people before, is looking to get to Europe as quickly as possible. So this green card is just something to help them out on their roster next year. But it might be an indication that if he went through this process, Kevin, that he probably is going to start 2017 in Orlando. And we haven't really heard much to suggest otherwise lately.
Exactly. On the same vein, Christian Aguida and Rafael Ramos as well have received their green card, so they will no longer count as international players in 2017.
All right. Atlanta, this one not so big red. You know, the big red.
Jeff Lementowicz.
Yeah, Lementowicz. He signed as the first free agent of the free agent season. This surprises me only that it was Atlanta that was the first team to get one to come in. And I think that that's the most telling thing about this signing. He's an interesting free agent. He's a guy that I thought TFC should have targeted last year. But the fact that like I said, that it was Atlanta that was the first into that mix, that was the first to announce it the day after they could, is a pretty good indication that the players are talking now about what is happening down in Atlanta, which is clearly becoming the most exciting expansion team launch since the Sounders in 2009, in the sense of the ambition that they're showing off the top. And that includes teams like Orlando and New York City FC that showed plenty of ambition, but this seems to be a different level, Kevin.
And that includes Oscar Romero, which apparently signed from Atlanta from Racing in Argentina. So you're talking about an Argentinian contingent that becomes very interesting with Almiron and potentially Romero, and the MLS lifers, MLS veterans that we have seen them pick up, just like Lorento, which gives them knowledge of the league, helps the other players transition into a different style of play. Or with Tata Martino there too, with the big red, he's going to have maybe a confidant about Major League Soccer and how it works close by, a sort of player that can be very important in the dressing room in an expansion club to make sure that it doesn't feel like an expansion club. So no, Atlanta United really is starting not just to look good outside of it with the money backing it and Arthur Blank and all that, but with their move from the front office now starting to take shape, and it's very, very fascinating. I can't wait to see them play because they might be pretty good in their first game.
All right, fair enough. Hola, Kevin. You're supposed to say hello. Ola Kamara. He is linked to several teams in England. I included this one in just to sort of talk about Columbus for a second. Columbus, God love them, seems, and I know they were in the MLS Cup final just last year, but do they not seem like a team that is starting to become, I don't want to say irrelevant, but bypassed in this league? And this is too bad because they are an original team. They are a small market team that I do think adds some value to this. Their history of getting the Major League Soccer franchise, if you don't know, they basically were dared to sell X amount of season tickets. And by doing so, they were told that they would, if they could sell some amount that was crazy and that MLS, I don't think ever thought they could get, that they said that they would give them a team. And well, they did. So they gave them the team. So that there's a nice history there, but it's hard to look at the Crew and just not forget about them almost instantly, right now.
I'm sorry, Duane?
Oh, sorry, I was talking about Columbus. I said it's hard to not see them as being bypassed in this league right now.
The MLS 3.0 we talk about, they were really good at the end of MLS 2.0 with Higuain and Arrieta a few years ago, and they led to a run in 2015 that saw them battle for an MLS Cup, lost to Portland. But since then, a lot of drama has happened. With the before Ola, there was Kai Kamara. That drama, Ola has stepped up this year. But for Columbus, with the Higuain, and you have to know where they move on from now. It's not just one; you need more than one impactful DP in MLS 3.0. So that it's like that transition and the stadium and everything else surrounding this club, it seems like it's missing that adjustment to what the league is becoming.
Yeah, I don't, as you just said, the era of being able to get by on smarts alone is gone. And you're going to need to find a way to also have more than one impact player, and more than one impact player that's probably costing you quite a bit of money. And a team like Columbus that has and this isn't an attendance bash, it's an attendance observation. They struggle at the gate, even though they had a lot of fans early on. They can, occasionally still flare up and have a couple sellouts here and there. But you even look in the Nordecki at times in the past season or two, and there will be blank spots in that. And when you start to see, that's how I view a crowd. If I see blank seats in the expensive seats on the camera side, like Colorado, where you can read the Colorado, I don't worry about that so much as when I start to see empty seats in the supporter sections. That's when in Chicago, you can see that right now too. Like the Section 8 is scattered at the moment, and it's not packed and it's not vibrant. And that's, what was dangerous with TFC back in a few days too, is when we started to see some holes in the supporters. That's where they need to get back. They need to get more of a connection. And when you start constantly turning over your top players, and if they do sell Kamara, that would be what they're doing again. I mean, you sell your Kamara and you're going to have a Kamara take over, then you're going to sell that Kamara too.
Who's going to be the third? What's the first name of the third Kamara? So, just quickly before we move on, we talked about the expansion. Today, Don Garber is going to address the timeline from now to 28 teams. So we'll know more about the 24th probably, but maybe not who, but when and how, and the next 4 after.
Yes, exactly. And breaking news, we're right. So there you go.
All right. So we're right. And you all know what that means. We are right. And in 15 minutes, you will all understand what that means. Speaking of what it means, the Washington Crossfire Indie PDL team got sold, and it's going to BC.
Yeah, well, we actually reported this on this show a while back. I don't remember exactly when. And actually, we're working on something that will allow us to better link our breaking stories, because we do break news on this story on the show quite a bit. And we're going to have some kind of format that allows us to catalog that so you can find them better and find them after the fact. But at any rate, that said, the Washington Crossfires are no more. They are going to be moving north into Canada. Why that is interesting, it's the PDL team we're talking about here. So on some level, it's not that interesting to people, but on another level, it is if you follow the Canadian development struggles and challenges and battles that are going on right now, where the CSA is trying to force the provinces to get out of the habit of attaching their top elite development to the American system. And this is a case where they are again. I have spoken to the person who has purchased this team, and I know where he stands in this fight. He believes that the CSA needs to do, if the CSA wants him to invest in Canada, there needs to be more opportunities for him to invest in Canada, is how I suspect he would put it. And right now in British Columbia, where this team will be located, there is no equivalent to a League One Ontario. And that's really a shame. Bingo card. That's really a shame, because we need that in all parts of this country. And before there was talk of the Canadian Premier League, Kevin, there was talk of the need to create regional D3 leagues. And so far, 2 of them have been created. Where's the third? Where's the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th?
The rest of the spectrum of Division 3 has not been addressed outside of Montreal and Ontario. Oh, Montreal,
you said Montreal, which is a bit of a slip, but it's not.
But no, exactly.
Basically outside of Montreal and Toronto.
Well, no, but there is close. There is some on the island. There's Outremont, and there's other one in the Montreal area. There's, I think, for the majority of the teams are in the Greater Montreal area. Just on the island itself, I think Griffon, Outremont, and Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, they're the only one here. There's Longueuil and there's other ones. That's Option.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the same with the teams. There's only, just thinking right now, I think there's only one team that, 2. Depends on what you consider Toronto proper. Like in the actual old Toronto, there's only one team. If you expand it outside of hit all of the boroughs, you'd probably have 4 or 5. But there's most of the teams are kind of in that umbrella, or the Golden Horseshoe, not necessarily Toronto specific. But yeah, it's in the 2 major urban centers. So we need to expand that more, and we need to have more teams. Kingston just created a partnership with Queen's University. They have a new facility there they're going to share, and they're going to try and jumpstart that program so that there's something for kids in southeastern Ontario. Same with the London program, which of course we're in the championship. Well, won the women's championship, and we're in the championship final for men's this year. They are doing a wonderful program there for southwestern Ontario. Windsor is starting to do a partnership with TFC to try and get a little bit more traction there. So we need more of those programs out there, and we especially need them in other parts of the region. And I always, when I hear stories of PDL teams trying to, people trying to bring PDL into Canada, I always give my back up a little bit, because I think, why don't you invest your money in trying to get one of these leagues started that we've been screaming for 10 years? Because that's always my issue with Canadian soccer, is people talk about what needs to happen, but very few people are willing to actually get down and do what needs to happen. I'm not saying necessarily that's what's happening here, because he is right. If there are no investment opportunities, it's something's better than others. And I do like the fact that there will now be, appears there will be a PDL, an elite development option in British Columbia that is not attached to the Whitecaps. And again, Whitecaps fans, that is not me being anti-Whitecap. That is me being pro-competition. And that's good for the sport there. Couple of quick things to end, Kevin. Anthony Terra tweeted out yesterday that there won't be any CPL news until Christmas. Just put that out there, so you're not asking us 60 times. And no, you can ask us if you want, but we won't have anything to tell you. And the Halifax stuff, Paul Byrne's been all over Halifax news lately. It'd be nice to have a team in the Maritimes. I don't know if the money's out there, Kevin.
We'll see. He has been being in a few markets, because you remember in Hamilton, he was interviewed the day it was announced, the day that it was announced that he has been hired to shepherd that project. He was talking to the Hamiltons. I can't remember the name of the
Spectator.
The Spectator. So he was talking about them, now Halifax. So just by his work, we see something. The blueprint is going to start to emerge from what we see from Paul Byrne.
Yeah. I mean, what little news I do have is that I know that there's a lot of frustration amongst a lot of people close to this project right now, because there is a lot of work that goes into the last few minutes of working out agreements. So you have to get all the owners together in a room at one time, basically, and doing that is difficult. And they know 2018 is increasingly, if they want to launch in 2018, they're going to need to announce very early in 2017. And everyone understands that. And everyone understands what it will do for the confidence of the project, and even for the believability of the project in some people's minds, if they don't get an announcement out there soon. And it's, especially with Paul Byrne out there talking openly now, at least this is now a project that's just not being whispered and by people like us, but that's actually being openly spoken about by those in the mainstream media, Kevin. We are going to cut it right here, because we do need to set up to record the press conference for the Canadian Players of the Year, which will start at noon. We'll get that raw audio out for you. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow, but we did the more fuller conversation today.
And we will try to have the audio of Don Garber's phone call as well later today.
All right. Until that time, as always, Kevin, say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for Soccer Today. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.